Oh, summary.
Not bad.
No, you're fine. There's something like.
Winter break time.
Oh, yeah.
It's not even gonna-
You're going to Costa Rica?
Okay,
Mike's going to Costa Rica.
we're
How
live.
about that?
For Christmas? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, well. All right, I am going to call to order the meeting of the Salem Planning Commission for December 2nd, 2025. And Jennifer, if you could, for the last time, read the roll for us.
Commissioner Fott is absent excused. Commissioner Fryback,
Here.
Commissioner Heller,
Here.
Commissioner Levin,
Here.
Commissioner Rhodes,
Here.
I think
Can you hear me?
Commissioner Rhodes.
Can you hear me?
Not yet.
We can see you. We can't hear you.
I am here. Not sure how the
That might be on
microphone's not
our end.
working.
Showing her is talking.
Do your speech.
My degree in lip reading tells me that she said she's here, but I don't know if we could get more.
They switch here.
Take your computer off mute.
No, I think it's our end. Other Zoom attendees can hear us. Or
I guess have Tom talk to see if it's on our.
Hello, can you hear me?
That's like, if you're not here, raise your hand, right?
Yes, exactly.
Can you hear me now?
I am talking.
Take a second to figure.
Well, we finished roll call. I think before we move to the minutes, we have, let's take public testimony.
We haven't finished minutes yet, or roll call yet.
You haven't finished roll call. Oh, sorry, I was
Yeah.
confused.
President Slater,
Here.
Commissioner Tev. Here. Commissioner Vieira Brindell.
Here.
We have quorum.
All right, we have quorum. And why don't we see if we have public testimony? Which I think we do. Which of you would like to join us first? Mr. All right.
Okay, President Slater, members of the commission, Mike Erdman with the Home Builders Association of Maricopa Counties. And so here to talk about the, I guess we'll call it draft of the proposal that you're talking about tonight. And I'm not going to talk about, some of maybe the process concerns, but I think we want to talk about some of the more substantive concerns with what's in the draft. And the first,
I'm sorry, can you just clarify when we talk about draft? What draft are you talking about? Is this the draft ordinance? Okay. No, that's okay.
I think we're beyond that. Quote, it says the city will designate as environmentally sensitive. That is not the outcome of a finished qualified inventory analysis. It's a policy. Land from. Once that land is moved to. Actually prohibits, new structure. Only number of exceptions, I think for, for many private parcels that touch, those features. Really functions as a. Land. In some cases, I think it really leads the land economic or development potential. What is the impact, for example, on an existing gravel mining operation with this? Prohibits mining and resource extraction. So the language in that proposal. Those waterways and lakes are de facto. When we're dealing with a development site that's dealing with these lands, the owner will have to split that environmentally sensitive area into a separate parcel, and put it in a conservation easement or to the HOA dedicated to the city. Let's look at under require a clear nexus in it. Landowners are unquestionably going to challenge. And there's no discussion in the report of the legality of this alone, how the city would pay those judgments or how it would fund. Rely on those uncommon. That, of course, state law, says that when you're protecting significant resources within the GB, the land that's already in an acknowledged plan. It's that capacity by expanding the UGB. And so if we're going to use these type of land large areas effectively on state law requires that you add land to the UGB. Of course, that undercuts entirely means longer trips, it means more vehicle travel, it means by taking that. And I think one of the things that's really concerning. That allows a nonprofit or a tribe or 50 signatures from voters to request a site.
So can I just jump in on this one? I apologize. I won't take away from your time. I think either that was poorly worded, which would be my fault, or easy to misunderstand, but it was to initiate the process to ask the council to determine. It wasn't to, okay. Clear.
Process easy to weaponize against specific developments, because again, 50 signatures is nothing, and we don't think that's going to happen. Every single development application case. Then we're not looking at this realistically. And it obligates the city council to initiate that process. Obligate the outcome necessarily, but delays to virtually every potential development site in town. And so even if it's ultimately unsuccessful, all of this really flies in the face of goal 10. More successful. Move forward on this concept at all. I think the recommendation here of the city process of the goal 5 inventories to exactly what's envisioned by state law. And so that would certainly be.
Thank you. Before you step down, are there any questions?
Please, well, this is a common situation here where we have both of you. Go ahead, see, right? Still there, like, you start, we'll reverse it next time.
So I read the draft ordinance and recognizing the real enjoyment that I had developing 9.5 acres that used to be the blacktop bat plant on 22nd and Gilchrist. It only took me 2 years under the current administrative rules, etc. And the addition of additional layers of government involvement have taken that development process in the Portland area to 4 years. And I asked somebody in real estate that is active in industrial and commercial development, how do you possibly plan for money commitments for that kind of change in market that will occur over a 4-year term? And they said it was a challenge. So I will tell you that I absolutely agree with the concept that this is creating an additional layer of administrative involvement where the majority of the concept is not required. One of the things that I delighted in seeing was that the proposed ordinance was going to include administrative conversations regarding White Oak when the city of Salem already has a substantial involvement with the tree coverage canopies, permitting, etc. And to say that this is a grievous conversation would be polite. I don't know how the city could potentially consider this draft ordinance and say that they are also considering the draft 10 housing program.
Is there a question?
There was a comment.
Fair enough. We can take comments. Commissioner Friday.
I just was wondering if you had these honestly made in writing, the attendance was,
Of course, this was abbreviated to try and get it within 3 minutes. So
Fine.
we have more extensive set of written comments that I can provide to you. And maybe give indulgence. I might just comment that I think the real concern here too is that, under goal 5, protected resources get varying levels of protection. They're not all treated with a bright brush. That's the real concern here is that everything here, once it's designated as this environmentally significant, it's not a sense of blame, it's often complete. Or I think when you're doing the goal 5 and then you're doing those protections, then you have certain resources that have stricter levels of protection, others that have more moderate levels. Don't account for this. Under this concept, once it's designated as such, it is completely off limits. And that's like a big discussion between what's proposed here, the vision here, and like it states more on goal 5.
There are other questions? I have just one. You made the comment that you see that this proposed ordinance flies kind of contrary to the intentions of the urban growth boundary, and that it allows it to expand. So is your thought then that everything within the urban growth boundary is developable? Like,
Well, when we have land in the urban growth boundary, I think we can leave the land. Absolutely. Yes, when it's included in our buildable land inventory, we deem that to be developed, because that's how to set the boundary. And if we're gonna take a big block of land and say, all of a sudden that is now off limits because it's designated, again, we're talking 10 to 25% of the city. And if the state requires you to compensate that protection by expanding the urban growth boundary, then by default, you're pushing that future development that could have taken place closer into the city core and pushing it to the outskirts.
that's very helpful, thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments?
Good evening, President Slater, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Anna Luciani. I'm a civil engineer at Multitech Engineering. Our office is at 1155 13th Street Southeast in Salem. I also wanted to talk about the presentation that will be happening later this evening. I wanted to specifically talk about number 7 under findings. I know you haven't seen the presentation formally yet, so maybe it's a little here. That's just how the process goes. So number 7 talks about how regulated resources are quote unquote permitted away, which maybe this will be clarified in the presentation, but the implication in that is that somehow all of the protected resources that are listed as possible designations under this proposal are somehow allowed to easily be permitted away. That's simply an oversimplification of a very complicated process. I can speak to almost all of the processes because we do a lot of development in town and I've applied for all of these permits. I've recently applied for a tree removal permit within the city of Salem. It was not what I would consider to be an easy process, nor was I allowed to just permit away all the trees. We had to make significant changes to the development that I'm thinking of, trees and which development I'm talking about, in order to save a significant number of trees, white oaks and all other types of varieties as well. In fact, we had to make changes and then one of them fell down after we made such changes. So that's Another example would be wetland permits, which, wetlands are regulated not currently by the city of Salem, as is what would be proposed under this, but they are under this jurisdiction of the Department of State Lands. They can also be under the jurisdiction of the Army Corps of Engineers. When you're under the jurisdiction of the Army Corps of Engineers, you're required to get a 401 water quality certification that involves the Department of Environmental Quality. And you're also required to get a slopes assessment from the National Marine Fisheries Services. So we were talking about, what was that, 5 agencies that are looking at permits that you have to justify why you should be allowed to remove those wetlands and mitigate for them. You're not just allowed to remove them, you have to mitigate for them within your watershed. And as a part of that process, you provide alternatives analysis. A biologist goes and he rates the quality of the wetlands. And those are all taken into account, and you're not always allowed to remove the wetlands. We've had many projects where we've had to change the development in order to preserve wetlands, to preserve buffers to wetlands. And so the idea that this is somehow needed within the city of Salem to provide another layer of protection of resources that are regulated by other agencies almost implies that those agencies aren't doing their job, which I think would be an interesting statement to make. Because it is in no way easy to get a wetland permit. It's in no way easy to get a floodplain development permit. It's no way easy to get a tree removal permit. I wish it was easier, but it is not. So I think maybe a better use if the planning commission is interested in having a positive impact on water quality in the area would be maybe direct staff to look at some mitigation measures for existing impervious surfaces. I mean, there's a lot of this town that was developed prior to the MS4 permit requirement from DEQ to provide water quality treatment. I mean, any new development that would come in and be subject to these provisions would have to meet the city's water quality standards. And so they would be required to treat their runoff. And which there's a lot of places in town that are not required to do that. So I think that would be a better way to protect the environment and would provide a more positive benefit to the watershed than this proposal. That's all I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Commissioner Rhodes, do you have a question?
No questions.
Sam is saying no at the moment. I do have one question. You said you've done some development in the city, which I'm certainly aware of, and that's involved, tree removals, wetland fills, floodplain development. So were those applications successful? I mean, in some cases, were you able to then fill the wetland or develop the floodplain?
It's been a while since I've done a floodplain development permit in Salem. The last floodplain development permit that I did was in Staten. And we were able to get the floodplain development permit through Marion County, but essentially what you're doing is proving that you're not going to have a negative impact, that whatever you're filling, you're also supplying. And so that's part of the permit. It's not that you're going to take away the resource, you're proving that you're not impacting the resource. Like for a 401 water quality certification that you're required to get as a part of your core permit for wetland, you have to list every TMDL for every watershed that you're bringing into, which you have to talk about how you're mitigating for that TMDL. You have to prove that you're treating the 2-year and the 10-year storms versus 0 and 5. I mean, there's so much that you have to do to prove that you're not providing, you're not impacting. So that's kind of, you're getting the permit by proving that you're not providing impact for a wetland, for a floodplain development permit.
Questions?
Well, what does the list of cooler rules look like, say if you're getting a wetland permit from, say, like the city of Staten, where you have to submit to the city?
Well, the city of Staten also does not regulate wetlands. I mean, most cities don't regulate the rest of wetlands because they are so regulated by the state and the federal government.
Sorry, floodplain.
The city of Staten doesn't do floodplain development, so it was through Marion County.
Okay.
And so we had to provide analysis that showed that we were not impacting the storage capacity in the area where we were proposing to fill.
Thank you. Other questions? No? All right. Thank you both.
President Slater, could we request a 5-minute recess to try to fix the audio for Commissioner Rhodes and then? So she can talk.
Commissioner Project.
It looks like the audio for the computer is muted. That's the unmute button on the bottom right, that might.
I think this is, I think that's the sound coming out of her computer,
You can try now.
but there's many different.
I have my mic on now.
5-minute recess.
Thank you. Okay, on the audio on the speakers, just select.
Testing, testing, testing. Testing. Testing,
Again,
testing,
Commissioner Rhodes, could you say something again? Testing.
testing.
Oh, she is, okay. She is. I don't know.
I guess while we're on recess.
Test, test, test.
Come up first. Who won the Rochambeau? Did you go first or did you go second?
But you can hear.
Well, you went first and last.
Working.
last week.
Echo canceling.
Yeah, you had all the positions.
If you could hear that was the only one that was working.
Yeah.
Okay, can you try again, Commissioner Rhodes?
Test, testing, test, test.
But it's
Can
not.
you
guys hear her enough for it to work? That's not how it's supposed to be.
Is it not how, I guess it's getting recorded into the. Time. Maybe.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, Tom says he can hear her and he's on Zoom with her. Okay, well, we can hear you, Commissioner Rhodes. It's just not the way it's supposed to be, but I think that
Okay,
works fine for us.
okay. I will just text if I have questions.
No, we can hear you, so you can go.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, great. Thank you.
sorry about that. Okay, I guess we're ready now. Are you ready? Are we ready? to
Yeah.
go back? Okay.
All right, bang again.
Thank you.
Gonna call us back to order. All right, I believe we have a motion from Commissioner Levin for the minutes.
Yes. I would, make a motion approving the minutes.
Thank you.
That's it.
As stated. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Friday is a second. Is there any request for changes or amendments to the minutes?
This is November 4th.
The minutes of. Is it November 4th we're dealing with? Yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, are we-
Yes.
Yes.
I had emailed one, the. Consent calendar was motioned by me, not Commissioner Veer.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay.
All right,
We
so
can
with
make that
that
change, yeah.
correction, could we get a roll call?
Commissioner Frybeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Heller?
Aye.
Commissioner Levin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rhodes?
Aye.
Commissioner Slater?
Aye.
Commissioner Tev? Commissioner Vieira Brindell?
Aye. All right. Passes. Oh, Commissioner Rhodes, yes, okay. Very good, motion passes. All right, so let's see. We have no resolutions, no public hearings. And we're on to the subcommittee reports, which is the unsurprising wetland subcommittee. All right, I think, well, let me make it a little preface here. So a few weeks ago, the wetland subcommittee learned that contrary to previous information, the meetings of the subcommittee had to be public. The result of that is it has been difficult for the subcommittee to get together at the same time and go through and finalize a range of details that we had hoped to finalize before today. In addition, we had a number of conversations with staff about the best process going forward. As a result of this, I want to provide two updates. One is tonight is a draft presentation. So at some point, the subcommittee will find time to get together and finalize this draft. So this is primarily a draft version that I finalized. So while I will say we, at this point, I'm taking responsibility for errors and omissions and misstatements, until my colleagues have a chance to send in their comments and we have a public meeting to approve it. The second thing is consistent with our conversation with Lisa. We agreed that introducing or discussing the text of an ordinance was confusing and probably not the best way to move forward in light of the repairing inventory that is going on. Therefore, we won't be focusing in this committee on the actual language of an ordinance. That does not mean that we will not recommend that at some point an ordinance is developed, but that this committee will not work on developing the language of the ordinance. So I hope with that clarity, I can then start this draft report. That makes sense? Any questions on that piece? All right. It feels weird to chair a meeting and give a report. Would someone like to chair the meeting and call on me? Don't all rush at once. I have no daggers under the cloaks here. Well, it would be helpful if someone, Robert, thank you. All right. With your permission.
Maybe we do right here. So what I tell you, Commissioner Slater,
Sure.
President, in these moments, would you please present the report of the subcommittee from the wetlands subcommittee work today?
All right, thank you. So as I said, this is a draft. I look forward to your comments both during the session and after the session. So I want to begin by noting that under Oregon land use policy, we tend to divide lands, we speak of lands into two different pieces. We talk about rural lands, which are primarily focused on farm and working lands in the timber industry, and we're talking about urban lands. And urban lands primarily are focused on developing and providing people the needs that they're looking for in urban areas. And I think we've heard some testimony already that by and large, the purpose of urban areas is for development. I think that our view, or at least my view going into this, is that there's a second type or a third type of land that was not fully addressed. And it's not been fully addressed by Salem, even though there are opportunities to do so, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. And therefore, we need to balance this a little bit more than we have in the past by making sure that we are both developing sufficient urban lands to meet human needs, but at the same time, we're preserving enough significant undeveloped land that we meet the ecosystem services that people also need in a municipality. In other words, we simply can't export all ecosystem services to outside the urban growth boundary, as much as we may like to do that. In terms of what environmentally significant lands means, we've identified these 10 items: rivers, streams, lakes, ponds, wetlands, riparian areas, floodplains, white oak groves, open spaces, and wildlife habitat. And I will say the 4 in bold are a goal 5 inventory items, which I'll discuss in just a minute. And I'd like to make clear at this point that the reason that we put all of these up here is because we want to think about them as a coherent set of objects that are all within the class environmentally significant lands. I'm not suggesting that these all have the same value or need the same regulations, but that instead, as a framework, as we think about how we manage Salem lands and growth, that we look at these as a set of categories that together add up to an important blue-green network that provides critical ecosystem services for the city in which we all live. So by ecosystem services, a word that was not even around in 1975, when land use was created, when our land use policy was created, simply means the ecosystem benefits that people receive from, the benefits that people receive from ecosystems. They're generally grouped in 4. Some people will argue that they're 3. I'm not getting into that argument. But they are provisioning, which of course is direct things such as water. Salem takes our water from the Sandian River. For example, food, fabrics, fibers, other things that we get directly from the land. Regulating services, which are probably more important for the city of Salem, are things such as flood control, temperature moderation, and similar disease control and a range of other items. Cultural services, which are probably the most popular. Those are services such as walking in a park, bird watching, gardening, sports, other outdoor activities, things like that. And finally, the much unappreciated supporting services, which is just the natural ecosystem processes of decay and growth and systems like that. And those really have not been factored into Goal 5, I think, or into our planning system. And it's certainly not something that the city considers as it goes about managing the development and growth and future direction of our city. I want to talk briefly about, Oregon policies. There's really two that I'd like to discuss. The first is natural resources. This is Goal 5. I think that Goal 5 very much was an attempt by the legislature to address that third land area, not rural, not urban, but significant lands. But in this case, for a number of reasons, it became an optional set of policies that cities or counties could choose to adopt, but did not have to adopt, even though we were required to adopt many other aspects of our land planning goals. In Salem's case, the city decided not to implement any of Goal 5, Goal 5 goals. Right. So although the city could have chosen to set riparian boundaries, they chose not to. They chose not to do a wetland inventory and adopt it. I understand they did do a wetland inventory, but did not adopt it. We did not adopt any wildlife habitat. The one area that we have done a very good job on, well, two areas actually, we've done a very good job, as I've been told, on historical resources, which is not a natural resource, but it is a Goal 5 resource. And I think we've done a very good job on open spaces, which is essentially parks. I think the city has done a very good job setting aside parks and very strategic in some of their acquisitions of parkland that have enabled us to maybe meet some of the other goals. So Goal 5 is still available for us, and this proposal or these recommendations from the Wetland and Streams Committee recommends that we do go ahead and implement the Goal 5 inventories, but also that we add to that a few other categories. Specifically, we talk about riparian, we talk about floodplains, white oak groves, and one other, which I'll think of in a minute. And then the second important policy to discuss that Salem is not fully considered, although I've seen some mentions of this in various planning documents, is the Oregon Conservation Strategy. The Oregon Conservation Strategy is the official ODFW plan for the conservation of critical wildlife in the state. The Willamette Valley is one of 9 ecoregions that they address. The 4 strategy habitats, the 4 key habitats within the Willamette Valley are flowing water and riparian habitat, grasslands, wetlands, and oak woodlands. So these are the specific areas within the Willamette Valley that Oregon official wildlife policy is trying to conserve and protect. Salem is inside the mid-Willamette Valley River area. And there are about, as I talked about, there are a number of conservation opportunity areas that they describe. So that's a little background in there. So regulated, not conserved. I think it's very important that we understand that there's a difference between regulation and protection. The point of regulation is to determine maybe a less harmful use, or to identify a gradation of uses, some of which are allowed and some of which have not been used. Unfortunately, I think what we've experienced in this city and we've experienced elsewhere is that, in fact, we can regulate something and at the same time find that at the end of the process, we have none of the original land left. It's all been converted in some form of developed land. Whether it is less impactful or more impactful may have changed, but the fact that it is developed, and by that it means it has an impervious surface or a roof or lawn over it. In those cases, the ecosystem services of those kinds of lands decrease significantly. And this is in fact one of the more significant problems we're dealing with, I believe, in the city, and especially when it comes to our floodplain, which has been slowly kind of eroded by development over time, is no longer able to provide some of the critical ecosystem services we need. This is particularly important because we expect to have significant increase of flooding in Salem, and the Willamette Valley over the next many decades, thanks to climate change. So Salem does follow a number of regulations. We have the River and Harbor Act, which is what puts the Corps of Engineers in charge of waterways in the city. With the Clean Water Act, which is related to our discharge of sewer and stormwater acts into the streams and into the Willamette Valley. The Endangered Species Act, which triggers whenever we use federal funds. We have the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. There's supposed to be a Y there. A Bald Eagle Protection Act. And then the National Flood Insurance Program, which is an optional program the city engages in for very good reasons. But the National Flood Insurance Program, as a recent court decision has found, actually creates a perverse incentive to develop the floodplain and has led to increasing pressure on endangered species, in this case salmon. So I think we can fairly say in this instance that the National Flood Insurance Program and the permitting system with floodplains, in fact, did not meet its intended outcome. At least it was conservation of floodplain capacity. And in fact, we recently passed new laws, much more strict laws related to floodplain regulation. We will see how those bear out. Oregon has its own wetland statutes. And finally, the city of Salem has a significant tree statute and riparian vegetation statute. So that's kind of the basic framework of land regulations here in the city. So talk just briefly about the why ecosystem services. And I've talked a little bit about the how, the preservation of environmentally significant lands, certainly the categories. And now I want to talk about how much, because how much is really the important question when we're dealing with land use and questions of housing and development. And so we've tried to answer that with a series of maps. I want to be very clear that these are estimates. I think these give us an order of magnitude. They are not exact. They're designed to help shape the conversation. I think my goal is at the end of this process, we can at least come to the agreement about the size of what we're talking about. I think the subcommittee is very clear in the fact that our responsibility is to simultaneously support development and meet the needs for housing and other economic needs in the city, while also trying to balance the needs for ecosystem services in the city. And that really is a tricky and challenging question. I think we're trying to kind of embrace that in a good spirit. That spirit talks about how much land are we trying to address. So looking first at the Willamette Valley, which I know known as pressing to develop, that's about 542 acres. There is already a 75-foot buffer around the Willamette River that adds up to about 216 acres. Those two areas combine, the total area of the Willamette River and the buffer is about 1% of Salem. Salem's a little over 60,000 acres total. So we talked about that just to give us a perspective of what we're doing. Streams is the next area. We have about 91 miles of stream in the city. I apologize, I have to find my notes here. 91 miles of stream in the city. So streams here are really one of the important areas in terms of ecosystem services. Our findings that we'll show in our report later is that streams provide important services, including stormwater management, which of course is what we particularly use it for. Groundwater recharge, this is recharging the water table. We're having a problem in some areas around the country, not necessarily Salem, in land subsistence, where land is sliding and breaking apart because the groundwater has been tapped too much. Climate regulation, fire risk mitigation, and of course, recreational, cultural, and educational opportunities. Salem streams are significantly degraded. Salem's urban streams are characterized by altered hydrologic flows, higher water temperature, simplified channel morphology, hardened banks, altered chemical profiles, and excessive pollutants. Notwithstanding the fact that we have a stormwater quality permit. Salem streams, as I already said, is an important component of our stormwater management system. That's how they're being managed today primarily. They're being primarily managed as our stormwater system and all the quality requirements that are associated with those. And then, despite the fact that we have a stormwater permit, our existing stormwater system puts significant stress on our existing system. We have thousands of outfall pipes that discharge into local waterways. Even when stormwater is filtered, the unnaturally rapid and concentrated flow, delivered through these pipes create stream bank instability, erosion, and sedimentation. Riparian buffers are what's under consideration by the city right now. They're doing a riparian inventory. The information that I have, I think, was just an estimate. This will be replaced by much more detailed information, I think, in the next few weeks even. And so riparian buffers are one of Goal 5's items. Goal 5 with riparian buffers allows for a safe harbor provision of a 50-foot buffer on either side of the top of the bank. That is likely to be, my estimate is that is our outcome here, that if there is an adoption of a riparian buffer, it will be 50 feet. Interestingly, some of the scientific research that I've read on riparian buffers indicates that 50 feet is the smallest but most reasonable number that it is the lowest number which you can get a reasonable outcome for water quality protection. So if you're looking for something like wildlife corridors, which is not at stake here, you're looking at anywhere from 100 to 300 feet. When we're talking about water quality, we're looking for something at least 50 feet, but up to 100 feet. In this case, the state safe harbor allows for 50 feet. So of course, Salem has not yet established this. This was the opportunity to do so was put in 1999. A number of other cities have done so. The city has not done that. My estimate right now is there are about 1,300 acres in aggregate of riparian buffers throughout the city, not including the Willamette, of course. And the key importance for riparian areas for ecosystem services include pollution mitigation, habitat provision, climate regulation, biochemical processing, fire risk mitigation, and recreation and cultural services. There's a lot of scientific evidence about the value of riparian buffers at this point. So wetlands is another Goal 5 resource, and our hope is that the next step after the riparian inventory will be the wetlands inventory. Salem did undertake a wetlands inventory at the 1999 or shortly after 1999. It was not adopted. It is a Goal 5 resource. Wetlands provide important ecological services, including stormwater management, water quality management, groundwater recharge. There are, well, you see, I have something else. There are, according to this map, and again, I want to be very clear that this map is really an estimate and is probably more of an estimate than some of the other maps. There is about 2,867 acres of wetland. That's the lime green color here. I think if you look carefully, you'll notice that a number of those have already been developed. This is out of date. So the number of wetland acres that we know about is probably smaller. It's maybe 10, 15, 20% smaller, at least, than what we see up here. The other part about wetlands is these are really estimates. They are not necessarily the results of any sort of delineation. Therefore, the boundaries may change. And finally, the orange in there represents any remaining undeveloped hydric soils. So hydric soils trigger an investigation into whether there are wetlands there and could result in a wetland. So I just want to point out that there's a possibility, as I said, that while we need to take some acreage away for developed wetlands, we need to consider there are possible additional wetlands on developable land. The floodplain, Salem has approximately 6,192 acres of floodplain in the city. Floodplains are incredibly vital for ecosystem services. They provide stormwater conveyance and storage, habitat for native species, groundwater recharge, water quality management, and of course, cultural services. Salem permits floodplain development, that is regulated, as we've noted. Again, I would note that regulations have not stopped the development of floodplain. I think we recently had a development I just saw maybe 6 months ago, just a couple, putting a parking lot just a couple feet off of Mill Creek, near where Habaneros is on State Street. So, and I just, a couple quotes here from the biological opinion, in the recent lawsuit. So floodplains are vital to the health of anadromous fish, those are fish that return from the sea back to spawning areas, because they provide important habitat during the freshwater phase of anadromous life cycle. And then I think what I particularly thought was useful in this context, quote, the reduction in floodplain habitat function is constant, incremental, permanent, and self-propagating. Once development occurs in an area, subsequent development follows. So this is from the biological opinion from the National Fisheries. Talk a minute about open spaces. And Salem has done quite well on open spaces. The open spaces again is a Goal 5 resource. It's defined as parks, forests, wildlife preserves, natural resources, nature reservations or sanctuaries, and public or private golf courses. All right. So the city owns and manages about 2,335 acres of parkland distributed across 90 parks. That's about 3.5% of Salem's total area in terms of size wise. 10 parks are classified as natural areas for a total of 1,391. So the majority of our parks are actually natural areas, and the majority of our parks are Minto Brown. So Minto Brown accounts for 1,216 acres of our park system. The city also has 119 acres of golf course, which is kind of the olive color, and another 109 acres cemetery that I know of. That is the other one. So wildlife habitat, the city has no demarcated wildlife habitat. It's not something that the city has looked at. The Department of State Lands has designated a number of our streams as essential salmon habitat. That includes, of course, the Willamette, but also Mill Creek, the mouth of Pringle Creek, and Glen Creek, and a little bit of the north or west Little Pudding River, West Fork Little Pudding River, also has is also part of the salmon. I just want to briefly mention lakes and ponds. I've included them as important. This is a very small area in Salem. It's about 400, I'll say about 400 acres of lakes and ponds. Our lakes, as we know, are mostly man-made gravel, the result of gravel mining operations. The ponds are a little bit different. These tend to be associated with low areas, wetlands, and floodplains. The importance about ponds is just they have a unique ecological function that are not taken up by lakes or wetlands themselves. So I wanted to point those out for the committee. So I tried to aggregate this. The real challenge in kind of looking at these numbers is that they overlay each other. So if you count them up, you're going to get a very large number that's not in fact an accurate representation. So I tried my best here to look at what we're really talking about. What are the numbers that we're looking at? And so we took the area taken up by the Willamette River, the streams and the riparian buffers, the wetlands that we know of, the floodplains and ponds and lakes. We get about 10,000 acres. That's about 16% of Salem. So that I think when we talk about land preservation, I think this is what we're looking at, and this is the map that I would encourage us to start with. And I think I want to go back to floodplain. One of the critical features in all of this is that a significant part of what I'm calling, or we're calling significant environmental lands, is floodplain lands. In fact, a lot of the wetlands that we're looking at, a lot of the ponds and other areas that we're looking at, the riparian areas, quarters that we're looking at, are also on floodplains. And the fact is that 80% of floodplains are owned by the city of Salem. So when we talk about buildable inventories, we're looking at what the impact of this is on housing and on building. But we can say that a significant part of our conversation does not impact buildable lands because a significant portion of those are already owned by the city of Salem in floodplains. The state owns another 10% of those floodplains. So overall, 90% of the floodplains are not in the buildable lands inventory. The other 10% I haven't categorized, so there will be a mix of both private and publicly owned lands within the floodplains, but I wanted to create kind of an outer boundaries on the conversation. So that when we kind of have the debate about how to balance this, how to best balance development and housing and ecosystem services, we're dealing with some more specific numbers. Again, even though these are estimates, I think they're accurate in terms of order of magnitude. Let me move forward. So this kind of captures all of those areas. I haven't done a breakdown as to what of this is again owned by the city, but we're looking at some percentage, around 80% is owned by the city or state. And this this does not include open spaces. So that would be in addition, although again, half of the open space is Minto Island Brown. Some of the other larger parks are also in floodplains. Which is why they were purchased to take up floodplains, so specifically. So finally, I just want to raise the conservation opportunity areas. The state went through a long technical process with the large stakeholder process to identify areas around the state that they thought were excellent opportunities for conservation. And they developed what are called conservation opportunity areas. 3 of them intersect with Salem. We have kind of the lower Ankeny, that's the Ankeny area. That's about around 1,500 acres. With the mid-Willamette area, which again is mostly Minto Island Brown, that's about 1,500 acres. We have a tiny little bit up in Eola Hills in West Salem. That's around 500-600 acres total. So if we were to look at kind of where the state's focused on, again, what I would point out is the significant overlap in at least 2 of those with floodplain areas. But I think what we are looking at is a future discussion around floodplains and conservation areas and buildable lands, and how these pieces all fit together, as well as urban growth boundary expansions. One of the points about Goal 5, and I think Mr. Erdman mentioned this, is that Goal 5 does allow the city to compensate itself for lands designated as Goal 5. So while we take lands out of the buildable lands inventory, we can add them back into the urban growth boundary. So moving to the conclusion here. This is Bush's Pasture Park, Austin 3000. So the main findings here we have. I can't read it. Okay. Where's the one? Yeah. Please.
Okay. Number 1, Salem's land use policies, contrary to our comprehensive plan, are not aligned with state natural resource policies. Number 2, Salem does not have a vision or integrated policy framework to preserve or manage our natural resources. Number 3, natural resources other than the urban forest have no political or senior staff champions. Number 4, planning and managing environmentally significant land are divided across several different city departments. There is no quote owner. Number 5, Salem's natural resources policy is by default compliance driven. 6, there is no citizen advisory committee or ongoing public engagement for natural resource management. And 7, regulated resources are quote permitted away.
And then if you could also do the recommendations for us.
Okay, recommendations. Number 1, align Salem natural resource policies with Oregon land use goal number 5 and Oregon conservation strategy. 2, enact an environmentally significant lands ordinance. 3, manage environmentally significant lands for ecosystem services and natural habitat. 4, preserve environmentally significant lands through conservation easements, deed restrictions, or other legal mechanisms.
5, develop rehabilitation and management plans for each class of environmentally significant lands. 6, make best use of GIS capabilities to track and report on natural resource management. And 7, improve cross-departmental planning and coordination among staff that set policy and manage natural resources.
That brings us to questions. This is, by the way, a photo from the Wild Run. So I believe Mr. Biorvino, you are going to be fielding the questions, if any.
Okay. Do we have any questions? Commissioner Levin?
So the concept is laudable, okay? Is it reasonable or appropriate or correct to say that you want to preserve and protect natural resources? And the short answer is yes. Okay. The devil is in the details, and that is, how do you reasonably accomplish that? Okay. So one of the concerns that I have is that making a statement about the need for something is simply a statement if there is no effective way to accomplish it. So the question that I would have, and this is for an open question, how did you conceptualize that something regarding natural resources, evaluation, management, documentation, inventory, etc., how would that be accomplished in the city of Salem? That's one question. And number two, what department in the city of Salem do you think would shoulder that task?
Thank you. Thank you. Those were great. Good question, and not comments. There were questions this time. They're like,
Other comment? I don't do that anymore.
Commissioner Private?
You focus on your at all, right? Right.
Throw down.
So I was just kind of curious, so. If say going back to like 1999. And we adopted land use goal 5, would we be having this conversation right now?
I mean, in the short answer, I believe no, because I think we would have had this conversation 25 years ago.
So if we just stop at line item 1 and you say we're gonna start doing goal 5 now. Like. Would we need to do anything else? I mean.
Well, I guess I think my understanding of the situation is that to enact goal 5, this is sort of a way to do that. And as Commissioner Levin stated, the devil is in the details. So trying to enact goal 5, great. I would love if we could just have that. But how do we do that? And how do we do it in a way that is, quite frankly, palatable to all the stakeholders that are involved here, so that it can actually be achieved and it's not just a statement that we're making saying, hey, I'd like to do this. And that's hard. That's real hard. And I don't have a great answer, but I think that's what we're trying to start, is have that discussion so that we can get to a truly feasible proposal to enact goal 5.
Are we aware of any other cities in Oregon that have passed up this opportunity to adopt goal 5 and are now thinking about it?
Oh, any others that have passed up the opportunity and are now thinking about it?
Yeah.
I am not. I know of many cities that have also passed up working on this. I know many cities that did enact regulations that more goal 5.
Yeah, I would just add, if I could. I would add that, to enact Goal 5, which I think is one of the things that we need to do. We're going, and it would be very similar to what we'd have to do with something like this as well, is we'd have to do an inventory for each one. We'd have to identify within each inventory what is significant and what we want to protect, which may not be everything. And then we'd have to go through, a public process involving the notification of the property owners, so that's a significant aspect of all of this as well. And my guess is the way that we would do it would be sequentially, not all at once. So, so I think, we staged out over many years. I think it might be the case if we were to take another approach to this. And I think that also that this came out of some frustration that the original riparian inventory was taking many years. And we were skeptical that it might actually be achieved and wanted to make sure we had alternative approaches if the riparian inventory was not completed or pursued.
No, as far as permitting goes, I mean, it sounds like there are already a lot of groups from folks have to jump through in order to keep this stuff built, because I mean, I don't want to add something unnecessary burden, say we enact some kind of policies of city to preserve our natural resources. I certainly don't want to double the time it takes to develop a property all around the city. If there's a triggering factors, like when this applies to every lot that somebody would have to do this process, and most of them could be filtered out if they're not. It's kind of crazy.
Well, I think, and I'm not trying to put words in for the legislator's mouth here, but I think part of what he was getting at the end there is that of the areas that would be plausibly designated as environmentally significant, most of it is owned by the city and the state. And so it really isn't going to affect a lot of developable properties in the first place. And I believe the idea would probably be that it would have to be inventoried and then selected somehow as environmentally significant. Before we ever even have that discussion, and it is a pretty small percentage of the cities we're estimating would actually be affected in any way. But this is the beginning of that process, and we don't know. And I think that is the discussion we're trying to have, right? Is what is that percentage and how do we address that?
Yeah.
There is a couple of items in here that were raising concerns. One of which is that in the development activity that I've been involved in, we've always talked about a 50-foot setback or buffer. This document and the draft document discussed a 75-foot buffer.
Can I make a clarification on that?
Yes.
The 75-foot buffer exists today for the Willamette River. That's where the 75-foot comes in. It's not contemplated elsewhere.
Okay, because all of the streams and ponds and everything else that I've been involved with as far as flood zones and floodways and a variety of different classifications, I've only heard of the 50-foot. Knowing that the 75-foot buffer applies to Willamette River only and not everything else is a huge step. The other thing is that the majority of the development ground that is low-lying adjacent to pond, waterway, etc., is normally toward the south in the let's say the Salem Airport general area, and is not impacted through the city perspective. There is a lot of industrial acreage that is impacted by this conversation. It is important that this I think if there's going to be a discussion, that it needs to be, the first priority needs to be the inventory. And once the inventory is complete, then there is going to need to be a discussion with property owners regarding the impact of that inventory and potential classification. Because one of the things that I've been involved with is working actively with civil engineers through the development process as they address each component of the potential development. And what really took me up short was all the new regulations regarding water quality that were layer upon layer of requirements that had a basic level of service requirement, obligation, commitment, etc. And then when I did the new development, then we found that changing the use from what was there and was a much rougher situation to a much better quality situation that mitigated so many of the other industrial applications. Not only did I do that, but then I was obligated to do an additional level, an additional level, an additional level of water treatment, purification, etc. of runoff going into a pond that I own. You know, so we were improving the situation and it just wasn't good enough. So the concern is that putting something like this into place is going to be another level of serious expense that will challenge the viability of a project.
I understand that point. And I understand the point about the cost and the time and the labor involved in the applications. I think one of the things, I hope that one of the outcomes, if this advances anyway, is that, again, we're talking about not developing instead of developing at a less intensive level. So if there's not development that's occurring, there's not the application piece, there's not the testing, it's not developed. So that's just a very different sort of approach.
Okay, so then that begs the question. If I've purchased a property that is properly zoned, that is appraised, evaluated by Marion County tax assessor, and I have been charged property taxes for the property as it is, that may or may not be in a flood zone, et cetera, if this were to encroach into that area that could or could not be developed, then that is a taking.
Well, I should defer to some of my lawyer friends here, but it is a taking when it doesn't have an appropriate nexus and public purpose. So there's a test to it. So yes, we have to be careful that as we look at this from a land parcel by parcel perspective, that it would pass, the Nolan test on all of this. But we know, for example, that the 50-foot safe harbor for repairing areas passes that test. There's a safe harbor.
Yes.
So I think as we go through this process, part of that conversation needs to be had.
Well, I think that the mapping, an accurate mapping and inventory is part and parcel to this concept. And then once that inventory occurs, then you can initiate a conversation about how to categorize, evaluate, protect those sensitive areas. Okay,
I think we can do them both at the same time, but I certainly think that we don't want to have legislation to be on that.
I think that initiating a conversation about how you're going to handle sensitive property before you've identified what the sensitive property is going to be a problem. Okay, and the reason is that if somebody is in the process of developing a piece of property and you come in with a comment and say, wait, there may be a sensitive area, that's going to be legal problems for the city. And that's what we should be sensitive to, is the question of enforcement that comes after the identification. Okay.
Other questions? Commissioner Heller, do you have any comments? I guess if Robert wants to wrap this up shortly. Do you have any comments?
No.
Okay. Commissioner Dunn, any comments?
Just one, I hear a lot of concerns about individual pieces of land and really what this, concept is all about is the city as a whole and how these pieces are interconnected. And so when you chip away at one piece of land at a time, you chip away at the system. And that's why we have water quality problems. That's why we have habitat loss and all of these environmental issues. It's a cumulative impact. So I just wanted to throw that idea. I haven't heard that really bounced around too much. Just wanted to throw that.
All right. Thank you. Do you want to just take us home?
Okay, well, I was gonna say, it's hearing no other questions, is that correct? No other questions or comments? We will close up the agenda item 8A, wetlands.
Did Commissioner Rhodes have anything? No, okay.
Wetlands subcommittee discussion.
All right, very good. Somewhere in my
So,
files.
yeah. So we're going on to agenda item number 9, planning administrator report.
Sure, we can see how, is my mic on? Yes, okay. The only thing I have to note is our December 23rd meeting is canceled. Was requested, right? Happy holidays. And we don't have any items yet for the January 13th meeting. We do plan to have a wetland subcommittee meeting on the 13th. In this room immediately following planning commission, if we have a planning commission meeting. If that meeting ends up being canceled, the wetlands will meet at the city offices. Is that
It's
correct?
important to get a clear communication out about that.
We will, yes. We will get that clearly out. So we still have a few more weeks before we know for sure if we'll have items for January 13th.
And we hope our members of the public do join us either way.
That's all I have.
All right.
And this is Jen's last meeting.
Oh,
Mission, so thank you, Jen, for your work.
It's applause for your future, not your last.
yes,
Thanks.
exactly.
Thank you.
Anything else before you adjourn? All right. Adjourn.